welcome. Thanks for tuning in. Today we'll be playing with strings in Blender and in Blender's geometry nodes. So open your geometry nodes panel and let's get started. We're gonna keep the default cube as we'll be using it as our node tree object. So hit new and let's get started. Let's make some more room and disconnect it here and search for string to curve, and strings means text or letters in Blender, because Blender runs on Python and that's the technical word for string in programming. And this node will help you actually just control what kind of font you want to use, how is it positioned on the plane, etc. So you can choose your font here. So by clicking on the little folder icon, I'm gonna go with Arial Black because I like the chunky feel of that sans serif, the really bold typeface. And here actually you can see all those parameters here, size, character spacing, etc. that you can play with to animate as well later on. So, but first we're gonna fill those faces with the fill curve node. And then what we will do next is that we will extrude. And for that we will need a join geometry node, because we'll be doing it in two different kind of node flows and then joining them together with the join geometry node. So let's make some space here and search for the transform node, because we want to position these letters slightly differently, so we want to rotate them a little bit. Search for the extrude mesh node as well, and then connect the transform to extrude and extrude to join geometry. And here we go. Now we have a full extrusion here. And now if we disconnect here, you can see why the join geometry node is needed, because we lose those original faces from which the geometry is extruded. So let's connect it back, and now everything is completely closed in. And with the offset scale on the extrude mesh node, you can control how much extrusion you'd like to have. So let's settle for something low, about maybe the width of the letters. And let's make some more room, and let's search for mesh line and put it somewhere there. And let's search for as well instance endpoints that you can drop in here, but our font will be the instance and the mesh line will be the object we instance our text on. So here we have a tower of funk, and let's play with the rotation here. Just put the X on 90 so it's really facing us. Here on the mesh line you can actually play with the offset and arrange it so that you have 0 on the X, you have a value on the Y, and you have a 0 on the Z axis. And then you can play with the offset, whether you want it positive or negative. The iterations, the number of instances depends on the points, and we have 10 for now. And here we're going to play with the scale. So let's search for the index node here and connect it to the scale on the instance and points, and we get something quite cool actually, because we have iterations and the scale actually grows from the smallest to the largest. depending on the index of the instance. But to be able actually to control it, we need the map range node, and we can just go back to the string to curves first, and then just use those parameters here to just position it on the plane where we want it to be. It's really up to you, but I like it kind of laying flat on the ground, and have it a bit centered as well, because that just later on makes a lot of stuff easier if everything's positioned nicely. So yeah, drop a map range node between the index and the instance on points node for the scale control, and here you can just play with the values. You can just make it grow from the first object to the last. Yeah, it depends how dramatic the increase you want it to be, but I kind of liked it maybe like this. Decide how much amplitude do you want it to give with all those instances that are growing behind it. Maybe as well, what you can do is make it tighter and play with the offset on the mesh line. Maybe even the letters are maybe too chunky. Maybe you want to reduce as well the thickness of the extrusion as well. I mean, it's really up to you. Just see what really works for you and how you want it to look. But here maybe, yeah, just look at it from all angles and take your time. I mean, it's really just having pleasure in doing this. And so here, maybe reduce the offset scale a little bit more, and then you can squeeze it in as well a little bit more by playing on the offset on the line. Something like this, maybe. Yeah, let's have a look at it rendered. Switch to cycles. So yeah, this is quite cool. So let's move on and let's add the set material node and just select the staple material that comes per default, and let's switch to the shader editor. Go back to rendered view, and here we have the principled BSDF that comes per default for this staple clay chalky material. So what we need is a color ramp connected to base color. So Control T and first enable Node Wrangler in preferences, and if you have done it, so Control T, and then you will have these three other nodes that connect to the color ramp. And let's switch the image texture to wave texture and connect the texture coordinate degenerated to the mapping. And now you can see that with the wave texture we can actually shade it in that kind of bands, iterating over the geometry of the letters. You can select a color and just reduce the alpha and connect the alpha to the alpha, so you get those empty spaces between the bands, and opt maybe for ease, cardinal linear, or constant, depending on how soft the transition between the color and the transparency you would like to have. I really like it to be really clear cut, so I just go for constant. But if you want something more subtle or diffused, etc., just go for any other setting. And here you can go for example, for rings to get this kind of 80s looking shader. And it's really cool with the transparency, you can just get lost in those lines. And you can choose the waveforms and get something like this. And let's jump into the world settings and put the world to pitch black, so then we can range the lights. I like to have one light on top and one underneath, just to have the whole geometry covered and lit up. And we will then animate those waves by animating the phase offset. So open your timeline, put the frame to 0 and go into the phase offset of the wave texture and set it to 0, and then I to keyframe it. Go to the end of your timeline, pick a number for your phase offset, let's say 360, and then I to keyframe it, and just play it again and see how it looks here. It's a bit quick, it's a bit fast, so we might want to slow it down a bit. So go back to the last frame, retype a value, so put something lower, like 100, and keyframe it again, and this seems okay to me, so that's quite cool. And if you want the wave animation of your shader to be really smooth without slowing at the beginning and easing in and easing out, just in Edit, Preferences, Animation, just make sure you check Linear instead of Bezier, and you'll be ready to go. So now let's go back to our geometry node editor. Let's fix a few things here. First of all, maybe just fine-tune the offset scale. As well here, just make them a bit tighter, close together. Then you can really increase the count if you like, and then if you really want it to be a gradual increase, you need to play with the map range again to adjust that as well. So yeah, just be creative, do something that fits your purpose, just play with it, have fun. something like this is quite cool. I quite like it. And yeah, as you can see with the transparency, there are a few weird lines inside. It's the faces, the extrusion faces. You can just check n-gons and they'll disappear. Alright, so we played with this. Now we can just re-increase the count. And yeah. Let's move on to the next part, and in the next part we'll have fun in a different way. We will be extruding as well, but for a different purpose. So we can select all this, frame it, so Ctrl J to frame it, and then rename the frame, and we can just call it text one. And if you like, you can pick the color that you prefer. I'll put it as a yellow because I've shaded them yellow, but it's really up to you. What we'll be doing next is that we will be actually setting up a similar kind of node tree. Disconnect this so we focus on what we're doing now, and then we will connect everything together at the very end. Go ahead, add another string to curves and just type in another word. I'm gonna type strange because I want to do a kind of a Stranger Things kind of logo. Pick the font of your liking. For my purpose, I will be picking up the font from Stranger Things, and then center the text, of course. Fill the curve with the faces, and then as well add the transform node because we want them to be standing up, rotated on the x-axis, and then we will as well going to extrude it. So here again, they are extruded, as you can see, really upright, and we can rotate it on the x-axis. Again, like we did above, we will join the geometry so we have all the letters really closed completely at the front and on the back. So next we'll be setting the material for actually both channels, because the face, the way I want the face to be, the face will not have the same shader than the extrusion. So you need to set two materials. So I've called them Strange 1 and Strange 2. So the Strange 1 will be for the face, the front facing of the letters, and the Strange 2 will be for the extrusion. Just went for the Stranger Things font that you can find for free on the internet, and go back to the rendered view so you can have a look at it, see what it looks like. and we will be now adjusting a few parameters here before we start shading. So first we want a negative offset because we want the face of the letters to be seen first, so the original geometry, and then the extrusion that follows. So yeah, that's kind of cool. Maybe we want to make them really longer, because we will be giving it a sort of a gradient shader later on, and that gradient shader will look like the letters are trailing and glowing. So let's start shading the face. So select Strange 1. We have the principal BSDF, and we will be reproducing almost the same steps as before. So look for a color ramp, connect it to the base color, and then make sure you have Node Wrangler enabled, because you can then select the color ramp, then do Ctrl T, and then you have all this trio of nodes. So the texture coordinate connected object to mapping to the vector of the mapping node, and then Shift S to exchange textures and go for a Musgrave texture. And now we have those nice noise, Musgrave noise texturing going on, and we can play with the color ramp and add colors. So we want something from a kind of a deeper red to the black color, so we have those kind of black scary smudges from Stranger Things. You can add more steps if you like. Select as well the extreme one as a completely transparent one, because we want those letters to have some transparency. So go from a whole transparent side to a full black one with those smudges. Have a close-up and then adjust those kind of stains. Yeah, maybe play with the scale of the noise and the detail, and see what works for you. Connect the alpha to alpha actually to see what it really looks like. Yeah, then adjust how you want those black smudges to look, and those are the smudges that we will be animating as well. And we'll take care of those artifacts as well from the extrusion on those faces and the geometry nodes later on. It's just a matter of unticking a box. So yeah, let's play with the colors and make something that looks quite strange and quite creepy. So go to the Musgrave texture, select 4D, and then for the W value you connect a value node and then hashtag frame divided by 360, and to just slow it down. And then when you play in your timeline, you can see that those smudges are being animated. So that is quite cool. And now we have to take care of that extrusion that's coming behind those letter faces. So let's do that next. So select Strange 2 and let's do that one too. So the idea is that it'll have kind of a gradient effect, so it looks like the letters are trailing and glowing. So delete the principal BSDF because we will be actually mixing different shaders. So search for the mix shader node, connect it to the surface in the material output, and then we will be combining a shader that is transparent shader and connect that into the shader number 1, and then we will look for an emission shader so we have that glow effect. And here you can see that there is the transparency of the transparent shader, of course, and then you have the emission and it makes it glow. So if you choose a reddish kind of color that is slightly darker maybe than the red of the Musgrave texture, then maybe if you increase the strength you get a glowing shader. And then for the factor, actually we're not going to be playing with the factor there, but we will use a color ramp for that. So Shift A color ramp and select it to the FAC, and then now we can play with how we want the intensity to be, etc. So it really looks cool like this, really, but we can go a bit further. If you Control T and get all the other nodes, so object to vector, and then swap the image texture for a gradient texture, and then just use diagonal. You can see how it's affected, and if you go for a B-spline you have that smoother gradient transition. What we actually want here is that the intensity of the gradient starts at the beginning and then fades out as it is further from the faces, and this is it. You just need to play with the x-axis for the location in the mapping node, but first also don't forget to put the rotation on the x-axis to 90 so that the gradient basically shifts axes, and so that you get that trailing effect. So this is it for the Stranger Things one. For those kind of artifacts that we have, we just need to untick the individual on the extrusion. You get really clean letters and completely hollow, and now you can see that Stranger Things animation going on. So yeah, that's quite nice. So we can connect everything together, but yeah, for that we will actually need the joint geometry node, but I'm not going to use this one here because that one is really just for our Stranger Things setup. So we can just duplicate it and then connect the top funk letters with the wave texture. We can just play with the transform node to make them bigger, thinner, higher, etc. So to arrange them together. Maybe the Stranger Things could benefit from a smaller scale, so there you go. You can just then lower it down on the z-axis here, and this is what we have now. So there's one last string fun we're gonna have. It's to create those kind of points that appear and fill in the letters. So first we're gonna select this together and frame it, Control J, and then you can hit N to have the side panel open, and then go into node and name it like text to strange, for example. Give it a color, maybe a red one, so it looks like the letters. And why not let's rename the first one and just add Funkwave, so we know what we're talking about. So there you go. So I'm gonna disconnect this here again so we can just focus on that last part and the last string node tree. So for the sake of the exercise, let's do it again. So string to curve and connect that to the output. There you go. Let's lower this a little bit. So what's next? You probably know. We will be looking for a fill curve. So there you go. And then last one, the transform node. So then we can reposition it, etc., and play with the scales. And then type in whatever you like in there. Then rotate it 90 degrees. Typed in points because we'll be instancing points on it. And then center it. There you go. And I'm just going to change the font. I want something fun and fat and really kind of 1970s or even 60s kind of design. So I'm going for a Bauhaus 93 regular. Yeah, so next, like we did up there, we can add a few nodes. So the joint geometry, because of course, yet again, we'll be extruding, and then as well, we can add the set material one to replicate if we want actually different kinds of materials for the face, etc., etc., and combine what we already have, maybe even. So set the offset scale, duplicate the material as well and put it there, and let's see if we combine what we already have. It's actually quite funny to have the wave material and this kind of Stranger Things spotty material on top of the faces. So it's really quite fun. Or have it completely closed up, or having that Stranger Things for the face one, the strange one, all over the letters. It looks quite cool and spooky as well. So yeah, but actually it's not really what we want to do. We want to be instancing points that appear and that change color, etc. So we can mute those by selecting them and hiding them. And let's continue, and let's put a node, distribute points on faces. We want to set the radius of those points. So look for set point radius, and then we can actually randomize that a little bit. Add the set material, of course, to finish the node tree. Let's play with the type of points and how they're distributed and how they look like. So add a random value for the radius and then put something like really tiny, so the maximum and the minimum range between, to randomize the radius. And then I like using Poisson disc because it means that the points are not going to overlap, and just increase the density, and there you go, you have points. If you want it not distributed on faces, you can as well distribute it into the volume of those letters, but for the sake of the exercise I just decided to stick on distribute points on faces. But of course you have enough computing power if you want to make something really crazy, then go ahead and use the distribute points in volume. And now again, what we're going to do is we'll animate this density maximum here in the distribute points on faces node to make them appear. So set it to 0 and then set it to the maximum value at the very end of the frame, and keyframe them by typing I on the keyboard while hovering over the density maximum slot on the node. For the material, let's create a new one and let's call it points. We need to attribute it here, and then let's switch to the shader and let's start shading. So we get this principled BSDF, of course. We're gonna play with the emission and add a color ramp there. And then, of course, as usual, Control T, and you get the trio of nodes, so object to vector, and then swap the image texture for a different texture, and we're gonna go with the Voronoi texture, of course, 4D, like for the Musgrave, and the W value will be the value we will animate, and choose the value node, connect it to it, and then again hashtag frame and then divided by a value, so to slow it down, so let's say 360 or whatever you want it to be. Give the Voronoi texture some colors. If you want rainbow colors, you can go for HSL, select the near or far, and then select the colors, the range of which will be then distributed across the color ramp. So when you play, those colors will appear and the points will actually shift color across that color ramp. And then you can play with the scale and see how dense you want the Voronoi texture to be on those points. Go for something really low, then you get kind of groups of those points that are colored. Or if you go for a very high scale, then the points will even bear several colors on them as well, as you can see. So yeah, that's quite nice. So let's go back to the geometry nodes and let's finalize it all. So as you can see, these are just points, and it's because we're in cycles that those points are rendered as perfect spheres. So you don't need to instance objects on those points, so that's really cool. So it really saves a lot of computing power and makes the whole workflow really smooth. So here we're just gonna join everything together. So we have the three texts in the same spot. So yeah, they're kind of one on top of the other. So we're just gonna lower the points slightly under the Stranger Things text. Play with the scale. Yeah, that looks quite cool and quite fun. Hope you had fun doing this, and I hope you come up with different variations, textures of your own, and combinations that you have fun doing. So here's the first node tree for the Funkwave text, and here's the shader. And then the second text. And the shader for the face. And the shader for the extrusion. The third text with the points. And the shader as well. So I really hope you had fun. Thanks for watching.